So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Richard Reed. Spent a fair part of my life in this building and working on these issues. I want to thank Dr. Holden, certainly Secretary Jewell, the Obama administration, and everybody in this room for contributing. I'm going to have the panel members come up now, and we're going to talk about the early warning part of today's discussion. But, you know, as I reflected on the comments earlier, I reflected on, I think it was in 2009, and Dr. Holden can hold me honest on it, but we did an exercise with the president on a catastrophic earthquake in California. David Applegate is in the room here somewhere and was trying to explain the phenomena that is liquefaction and what that would do. And so that work literally started in earnest some 7-8 years ago, and I think where we're at today represents progress. Now, the other thing I'd say around resilience, which is why I keep trying to go to this slide, you think about that notion, what does it take to be resilient? How do you measure it? How do you sustain it? How do you invest in it? I will tell you that it's not linear. I think the road to resilience is necessarily full of on-ramps and off-ramps for folks and communities and companies and organizations to get on and contribute and to get off. And I think the work you're going to hear presented here today is really live examples of what is a whole of community approach if you think about Administrator Fugate at FEMA. You got the president's comments, an all of nation approach, leveraging the technologies. And I think as Secretary Jewell said, it is not new in the sense that we have developed using science, using technology, leveraging the business communities, ways to alert and notify people. 50 years ago, our understanding of weather events was nowhere where it is today in terms of providing minutes and now hours and now days. We have 5 days alert and notification around hurricanes, which enable us to make some good decisions, save some lives, and pre-position supplies and those sorts of things. So I think what you're going to hear about from this panel is really around the technology and the practical application of that technology and providing that alert and warning. And then I think what the necessary takeaway is going to be is, okay, so now we've alerted people, what are they supposed to do? Organizations like the American Red Cross and others are committed to help carry that message through, engaging at the individual, family, and community level with our fellow nonprofits, our faith-based institutions to help get this word out. So very, very excited to be here. I'm going to introduce each panelist individually. They'll come up and provide you a sense of the work that they're doing, and then we'll wrap it up. So Richard Allen will be up first. He's the director of the Berkeley Seismology Laboratory and professor chair of the Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences at UC Berkeley. He's an expert in earthquake alert systems, developing methodologies to detect earthquakes and issue warnings prior to shaking. His research has been featured in Science, Nature, Scientific America, and the New York Times. Has a BA from Cambridge, PhD from Princeton, and was a postdoc fellow at Caltech. So please join me in welcoming Richard Allen.
Well, thank you, Richard, and thank you for the invitation to be here. It's very exciting, obviously, to be participating in this discussion that we're going to be having this afternoon. So the first panel got together. We were asked to sort of talk about what earthquake early warning is and how it can be used. And to give you a sense, I'm going to give an overview of what early warning is. I'm then going to hand over to John McPartland, who's going to talk about one of the applications. My colleague John Vidale from the University of Washington is then going to talk about how we've built the system and how we could roll it out. And then we're going to hear from Bob Kirshner of the Moore Foundation, who's going to talk about the commitments to pushing early warning forward, to give you a sense of what we have coming. Okay, so to start with, what is earthquake early warning? Actually, before I say that, I just want to acknowledge the collaboration that has been going on for many years at this point between the universities, Berkeley, Caltech, University of Washington, University of Oregon, who have come together to really develop the science and the technology with our scientific colleagues at the US Geologic Survey and then with the Moore Foundation over the last few years. And this collaboration is really what has brought this whole project together. And so I want to acknowledge that right up at the very beginning of what I'm talking about. Okay, so my role was to kind of give you the overview of early warning. So first obvious question is, what is earthquake early warning? And sure enough, as with all good presentations, we have technical difficulties. So I think we're going to pull out of this and show you the video separately out of the presentation. Okay, so what is earthquake early warning? What you're going to see now is an animation that is running in real time. This is a big earthquake. This is a magnitude 8 earthquake on the San Andreas Fault. You can see that the earthquake initiated up at the northern end of the San Andreas Fault. That broad brown swath is the earthquake rupturing down the fault. Now, it's going to take some time. This is real time. It's going to take some time for that rupture to actually make its way down to the San Francisco Bay Area. Now, the circles here represent the energy that is radiating out from the earthquake underway. The yellow, just arriving in San Francisco right now, is the P wave. So San Francisco would start to feel the shake. They would certainly feel it. They would know that an earthquake was going on. But most people would assume that this was actually the strong shaking from a relatively moderate earthquake close by. They would have no idea that, in fact, it was just the beginning of a much larger earthquake. The real shaking doesn't start until the S waves arrive, illustrated by the red circles on this, in this cartoon. And so the S waves arrive in San Francisco right about now. Now the real shaking starts. Now people really know that they're in trouble. They'll be ducking and taking cover under sturdy tables and things like that. But still, that's not the strongest period of shaking. It's not until the rupture itself, that thick black swath, makes its way all the way down to the San Andreas Fault just offshore of San Francisco, that the strongest shaking occurs, when most of the damage will be done. That's still another 20 or 30 seconds from now. So the whole idea behind earthquake early warning is to take advantage of this time, to put sensors across an earthquake-prone region so we can detect the earthquake when it nucleates at the beginning of the rupture, assess how big it's going to be, and push an alert out to the people who are in harm's way, who are going to experience the shaking. This is the worst-case earthquake for the San Francisco Bay Area. This is a magnitude 8 earthquake. It's coming down the San Andreas Fault towards the city, which is what gives it an extra punch. It's also the best-case scenario when it comes to warning time. In a scenario like this, there could be a minute and a half worth of warning. So as the Secretary mentioned a few minutes ago, the amount of warning you get varies. It's between seconds to tens of seconds. Best case scenario in California is about a minute and a half. You go up to the Pacific Northwest, a magnitude 9 earthquake, and you could be talking about 5 minutes worth of warning. So that's the idea behind earthquake early warning. That's how much warning time we have. Okay, can we go back to the slides? Okay, so given that that's the amount of warning time that we have, who could use early warning? Who can take advantage of this, this warning that we have? The first thing that people think about is their own personal protection. What could I as an individual do in order to reduce the impacts of the earthquake to me? And this is about reducing falling hazards. So most buildings are built to withstand shaking. They shouldn't collapse, but still things like falling lighting fixtures, ceiling tiles can cause a large number of injuries, kind of pictures that you can see here. In Loma Prieta, we find that more than 50% of the injuries were linked with falls. In the Northridge earthquake, more than 50% of the injuries were associated with non-structural falling hazards, ceiling tiles, lighting fixtures, things like that. So what that means is that if everybody receives a few seconds of warning, if everybody drops, takes cover, and holds on, like you should do, then potentially earthquake early warning could reduce the number of injuries in an earthquake by 50%. That's a significant reduction in the impact of earthquakes right there. To give you a sense of the dollar value of that, it's estimated that the cost of just the injuries in the Northridge earthquake was $2 to $3 billion. The Northridge earthquake was not a huge earthquake. It is not the worst case scenario by any stretch. So that's application number one. That's what you as an individual should do, is take cover under a sturdy table when you get the warning. The other area of application, of course, is automated control. Slowing and stopping trains. We're going to hear from John McPartland from BART next. Stopping elevators and opening the doors at the nearest floor so we don't have thousands of people trapped. Isolating hazardous chemicals, hazardous machinery to reduce spills. Also to speed up recovery after the earthquakes. And then data security, putting data into secure storage so that you're not likely to, or less likely to, lose that data during the course of the earthquake. All of these things reduce the immediate costs and assist us in our recovery after the earthquake. A natural extension of that is situation awareness. Anybody who is running systems over a large area, understanding what's going on, can prevent cascading failures across the system. Okay, so that's who can use early warning. So how should you get a warning? Well, I think in the modern era, the number one way that everybody wants to get the warning is on their smartphone. The whole concept of a warning in your pocket. And we can do that today. We already do that with the demonstration shake alert system that we have in place. So what might that look like?
Earthquake, duck cover and hold on, strong shaking expected.
So this is just one example app that actually we're running right now to demonstrate the capabilities of the system. Of course, smartphones, they know where you're located, so when you push out the alert, it can determine how much warning time you have and how strong the shaking is going to be at your location, so you can immediately respond. So clearly, cell phones are going to be one of the key ways that you push out the warning. Of course, the intent is there will be a plethora of apps that you can download to get the warning when this becomes a public system. Of course, we want to push it out in as many ways as we can. Apps on your computer. We also have a demonstration app for your computer that test users use to get the warning right now. We want to push it out over TV, over radio. We want to link it into everything. Link it into your home security system so you get the alert at home. Link it into the PA system where you work so that you get a notification in the office. And many more, as many applications as possible. Now, what's really important here is this isn't a pipe dream. This is a technology that exists. It's a technology that has already been proven here in the US. And to demonstrate that, I'm going to show you this warning.
Earthquake, light shaking expected in 2 seconds.
So this was an actual warning issued by Shake Alert at the time of the Napa earthquake in 2014. It was pushed out to our test users, including BART, including the police department at UC Berkeley, emergency offices in San Francisco. And so this demonstrates that this is a technology that exists, it works, and it's ready for broad consumption. Finally, people actually want it. We know that people want it. If you doubt whether people want it, ask anybody in California if you want earthquake early warning, and you will get a very clear answer. In Japan, as the Secretary mentioned, they've had an early warning system since 2007. It issued an alert in the 2011 Tohoku-oki earthquake. And so about a year later, they did a survey, both nationally and in the Tohoku region, and there was overwhelming support for the earthquake early warning system. There's a system in Mexico, there's a system in China, Turkey, and also even in Romania. So it's time to implement this here in the US. I want to finish by showing you this short little demonstration of the application
Once there
of
was
early
a
warning.
bull named Bill who felt a certain thrilling chill each time he saw a china shop. The teacups made his heart flip-flop. He couldn't help but to cry and pout, for each store's sign read, "Bulls, keep out."
Earthquake, duck cover and hold
Children,
on, strong
there's
shaking
earthquake.
expected.
Duck, cover, and hold.
Earthquake, duck cover and hold on, strong shaking expected. Earthquake, duck cover and hold on.
Are we ready?
Yes, we're ready!
Are we ready?
Yes, we're ready!
The obvious question, are we ready? And the answer is, I don't think we're ready just yet, but I do think that we're making a lot of progress. As has already been mentioned, this project is the result of a broad collaboration between multiple organizations that really has made a huge amount of progress over the course of the last year. I think the fact that we're having this summit today is really an opportunity to push the project forward as we look to turning this into a full public system. And I would also like to acknowledge folks from Congress for really supporting this. Adam Schiff has been an advocate for this from California for a number of years. Greatly appreciated to move this forward. Hopefully, we can move this to a full-blown public early warning system over the course of the next few years. Thank you very much.
Outstanding. Thank you, Richard. I appreciate that perspective. And again, that technology is available today. So it's not in somebody's laboratory being developed. It's ready to go now. John Vidale we'll hear from next is a professor at the University of Washington. I'm sorry? Of course it's John McPartland. So we'll hear from John Vidale later, but right now we'll hear from John McPartland. He's serving his second term on the board of the Bay Area Rapid Transit System, the BART system, having been elected in 2008 at first and re-elected in 2012. Strong earthquake preparedness advocate, as you can imagine. He served on the California State Seismic Safety Commission in 2010 and 11, and in 2014 testified on earthquake early warning to both Congressional and California State Senate committees. He's got his BA from St. Mary's College in California, thesis on earthquake planning, master's degree in public administration from Cal State East Bay in Hayward, California. Has graduated at U.S. Army's Command and General Staff College, HUA, and holds numerous professional licenses and degrees and teaching credentials in emergency management, disaster preparedness, and incident command. So please join me in welcoming John McPartland.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. And before I get started on earthquake early warning, I have to point out that BART has already invested close to $1 billion in earthquake retrofit because in order for the system to be able to survive, it's going to have a strong infrastructure underneath it. Having said that, it's of little value if we end up having derailments, and that's where the value of early earthquake warning comes in. The slide that we end up having next is basically going to show all the fault lines in the BART service area, the 4 counties that we serve, and the Transbay Tube that goes underneath the bay. The fault lines end up indicating the 2 biggest ones that we are mostly concerned of that we expect to be active are going to be the Hayward Fault and, of course, the San Andreas Fault. In the time that I have available here, I am going to answer 3 critical questions. How does earthquake early warning work on BART? Number 2, what are the potential consequences of not having an earthquake early warning system? And third, what is the value of BART in the post-major earthquake environment? To that end, going on to the first one, the first BART has, to start off with, we've already had earthquake early warning since 2012. And the early earthquake warning signal triggers automatic train speed reduction. There is, however, of course, demanded by the central manager, there is human intervention so that in the event of a false positive, we have the ability to go ahead and resume service. Derailments cannot be predicted. There are too many variables. But the 2 largest variables associated with earthquakes and derailments is going to be the size and magnitude of the earthquake and the speed of the train. We can't do anything about the magnitude, but I can do a lot about the speed of the train if I end up having earthquake early warning. To that end, our trains operate at a max speed of 70 miles an hour. And if I have 20 seconds of warning, I can reduce that speed down to 10 miles an hour. Needless to say, any train that is going at a slower speed than that is going to be at a dead stop. All right? Question number 2, what are the potential consequences of no early earthquake warning? The only apples to apples comparison that I can make is from New York City in December of 2013. If those of you can remember or recall that back, they had a 6-car train with approximately 100 patrons that derailed at 82 miles an hour. More than 50% of the people were injured, 11 of them critically, 4 people died. In addition to that, all of the, not on the press, is that it exhausted all of the public safety resources, police, fire, EMS, not for hours, but for days. And it took more than a week in order to be able to clear the scene and restore the traffic, the rail traffic that they had. So let's go ahead and take a look at exactly how that compares against the Bay Area Rapid Transit System. During peak commute, well, first of all, we end up carrying 430,000 people per day, passengers. In addition to that, during the peak periods of traffic, we end up having 64 trains on the track. Most of those are 10-car trains, and we end up having approximately 150 people in each one of those cars. In comparison to New York City, one 10-car train derailing would be the equivalent of New York City times 15-fold. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have that many hospital bed capabilities in all of Northern California to accommodate that for one train. But what about the entire system? We have 64 trains that are running. Over 40 of those are going to be going approximately 70 miles an hour. And if I were to take a look at all of these dots that I have right here that are flashing, if I had multiple derailments, we had a catastrophic multi-casualty situation where there's just absolutely no way to go ahead and deal with that. Don't forget also that once the earthquake strikes, we find ourselves in a position where all of your public safety, EMS, fire, law, are exhausted immediately. And it's a first-come, first-served basis. So if all of the fire services are dispatched on other incidents and collapses and entrapments before we end up even finding out about derailments, we're pretty much up a creek. This can end up being prevented by that early warning system. Back to my original case where I end up saying that if we find ourselves in a position where I have 20 seconds of warning, I can reduce the speed of that train from 70 miles an hour down to 10 miles an hour. The potential for derailment is going to be absolutely minimized. The rest of the entire fleet is going to be at a complete stop. And if the shaking is so bad that it ends up bouncing that train off of the tracks, then, oh well, at 10 miles an hour, the biggest injury that we potentially would have would be a twisted ankle. All right? So let's go ahead and crank that back. What if I don't have any of those derailments? Going on to the third question is, what will end up being the consequences, or what will be the results if we end up having the earthquake capability or the early earthquake warning capability, and what will be the potential resource of the Bay Area Rapid Transit System in an immediately post-earthquake environment? Think about that from the standpoint of there will be partial and complete collapse of the infrastructure, and there will be pockets of isolated people and injuries throughout the entire Bay Area or throughout the entire fault line shockwave areas. And within those pockets, we will have, if BART is continuing to run, and as these blockages that we show here do not exist, we will have the ability to get resources in and evacuate people out. During that critical time, immediately post-earthquake, our resilience is going to be directly proportionate to our ability to service the needs just as quickly as possible and get resources in and evacuees out. When we have on-ramps for freeways that have to be evaluated before they're structurally sound in order to be able to use, BART will end up making its own evaluation if it's safe to run. And having said that, we can end up carrying people 1,000 at a time on these trains in order to be able to get them out and get resources in. But it has to be planned. And we have to make sure that we don't have any derailments. And the best mechanism for that is to have earthquake early warning. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Ladies and gentlemen, in traditional fashion, and welcome to the emergency management community, we're going to take a pause on our next speaker, and I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Holden for a second.
Thank you. Our unexpected surprise in the schedule is that a vote has been scheduled in the House of Representatives for 1:45, and so we are going to hear from the congressional contingent and then resume the panel after we hear from them so that the members of the House can get to the vote. So we're going to start with Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon. He was elected to the United States Senate in 2008, re-elected in 2014. currently serves on the Appropriations Committee, the Banking Committee, the Budget Committee, and the Environment and Public Works Committee. He's been a strong voice in Congress for funding the West Coast Earthquake Early Warning System, and in fact has been a longtime advocate of greater earthquake resilience, preparedness, and mitigation. So, Senator Merkley, please.
Well, with the House vote pending, no time for a Senate filibuster, so I'll try to be quick here. The threat of the Cascadia mega quake is something that has riveted our attention in the Pacific Northwest. As John mentioned in his introduction, at the high end there is estimated to be a risk of 1 out of 7 chance that the next 50 years will have a magnitude 8 or 9 earthquake. That is a very substantial threat, as you can imagine. And every time the earth shakes, we wonder, is this the big one? The year that I was married, 1992, it was early morning in Portland, and the room started bouncing up and down, and I jumped up out of bed. Our mattress was still on the floor as not yet a very financially successful couple, and we had the cinder blocks on the wall with the boards and the books, and I'm bracing all these rows of books that I'm afraid are going to collapse onto my wife who's sleeping, and I'm screaming at her to wake up, and she slept through the whole thing. And it was some years later that I was down in Salem sitting at my desk as a state representative, and my chair started rolling back and forth, and I thought, well, is this a mild quake, and does it mean that there's a massive quake up in Portland where my wife and children were? And it wasn't too bad of a quake, but each and every time we wonder, is this the moment? And we want to be as prepared as possible, and therefore there are so many entities in Oregon that are working together to try to develop the early warning system, to expand it, to expand the ability to communicate the results of the early warning system so it actually makes an impact, to prepare emergency response teams to respond, to assist after a quake. I wanted to mention that the mayor of Eugene is here, Kitty Piercy. Kitty, welcome. And Eugene is in the partnership, the Oregon Partnership for Disaster Resilience, and working to develop community emergency response teams. The University of Oregon has leaders here. They're very involved in a multidisciplinary effort for both earthquake and tsunami preparedness. Certainly for Oregon, it's not just an earthquake, it is the tsunami that we're so concerned about on the coast. During the Japanese earthquake, the tsunami traveled across the Pacific and almost in a targeted vector hit the intersection between California and Oregon in the area of Brookings. And so we actually have, in recent memory, had a small tsunami, a modest tsunami, did quite a bit of damage in our state. The governor has a representative here, Andrew Phelps, who is the state emergency manager. Governor Kate Brown is very committed to this partnership and has hired a state resilience officer. Intel has representatives here, a major investor in the capital operations of Oregon. They have major presence, one of our largest employers. And they're very interested in facilitating the business partnership of translating the early warning system into the type of warnings that will reduce damage. And so there are others as well. Let me just say that exemplifies how this is a partnership at every level, and the federal government has to be a key part of this. Whether it is funding a better network of detectors, a better way of communicating to citizens, as we've seen exemplified here in a couple of examples, a better way of shutting down gas valves and stopping those elevators at the appropriate floors so they aren't stopped between floors, to not be too helpful to an elevator full of people, and so on and so forth. So it's a pleasure to be part of the federal side of this partnership, and I'm so appreciative to the Department of Interior for sponsoring this gathering, the White House for sponsoring this gathering to magnify the conversation about this threat and how to best prepare. Thank you.
So next up is Congressman Peter DeFazio of Oregon. He was elected to the House of Representatives in 1986 and is the longest-serving House member in Oregon history. He serves as the ranking member of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. He has, notably for this purpose, the purpose of this event, held numerous town halls in his Oregon Coast District on earthquake issues, and he helped to organize a House hearing last year that garnered bipartisan support for the warning system. Congressman DeFazio.
I'm pleased that we're here today. I thank Interior Secretary Jewell and others in Interior who advocated for this event. I just returned from Japan less than 24 hours ago, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what they're doing. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. I wasn't. It's extraordinary. They know that they're going to have another major quake. They use a different scale. We were never quite able to translate it, but it seems like they are planning for greater than a 9 in terms of the Tokyo area. And one thing they've done, how unbelievably valuable real estate is in Tokyo. They cleared an area down by the harbor. They dug a giant pit. They put in layers of engineered and compacted soil, and they built what they call a disaster recovery park. Because we were going to go to the disaster recovery park, and I'm like, what? This is on the itinerary. We're supposed to be, they have their Operation Command and Control Center there. It's in a building built to withstand more than a quake of 9. They built a new hospital there, which operates on a daily basis as a hospital, but it can add 200 beds to their existing 250 beds in the case of an emergency, which will also withstand more than a 9. They have helicopter landing pads, a very large area that's open space now in a park in non-emergency times, but would be filled with recovery equipment and supplies, which would be provided not just by heavy lift helicopters with all the helicopter landing pads, but also by berths that they built, which are also tsunami and earthquake resistant. An unbelievable investment. And we can certainly learn from that. And if you go beyond that, they learned a lot with the quake. We've all heard about Fukushima. They had already deployed, sensors, so they thought that they could predict what was going to happen in terms of tidal waves, but they learned that 2 things. 1, they didn't have enough out there to really predict the height of the waves, and 2, when the earthquake happens, all the communications in the region that was going to be impacted by the tsunami went down. So they're now moving to a cellular-based system to alert people, and they have deployed, you can't see this, but this is an incredible number of buoys in the ocean, both surface buoys, GPS buoys, ocean pressure on the floor, which are cabled. These are all real-time. More on the coast. So they are tremendously enhancing their network. And of course, we've got nothing out there in terms of tsunamis. And we do have some seismometers out by the where we think the big one's going to happen on Cascadia, but those are just recording events. They're not cabled. They're not going to be real time. We need real time on the ocean floor. We need real time on the ocean surface. And then land-based sensors. I was talking to some people who are very involved, and they say, well, it's really not going to do much because the waves travel so quickly through the ground. Well, they told me, and again, if the translation was right, that a wave moves shock wave about 5.3 kilometers per second. Well, they can shut down the Shinkansen in 10 seconds. I'm pleased to hear BART can do it in 20, but they can take a train going 190 miles an hour in 10 seconds. They can take that train and in an emergency stop. So they are going to also use the land-based system to, because if they have so many land-based sensors that they're going to be detecting, 100, 200 kilometers away, and have already algorithms to predict what that shock wave would mean at a point 200 kilometers from there, and we'll use that to decide whether or not to instantaneously shut down systems, also shut down elevators. They've wired a lot of things. Tokyo has been basically rebuilt. They've retrofitted their buildings, something we did a little bit of in the Clinton era with some FEMA allocations, something that we haven't done since in terms of federal assistance. I hope we could get back there. So we need to do prevention in terms of our buildings. Oregon is beginning to tackle this problem with schools. We need also, like I say, an ocean array, and we need land-based sensors, and then we need to build the systems that can utilize those, and we've got to work toward a cellular network. One example, Brookings Harbor, the World War II air raid siren, which a lot of people couldn't hear a little way up the coast last time they used it, is down at Brookings Harbor. So basically, you've got to sacrifice yourself if the tsunami is close to get down and turn on the siren. They can't even remotely trigger it from higher ground. That's kind of the state that Oregon's at now. It's not where we need to be. And one other quick point, because this is a place for you to be educated, so I'm not going to be political about this, although I am working on some things in the FEMA reauthorization that could help move us along. But this is a guide that's distributed to, this one's in English. Every resident of Tokyo got this. This is your guide to how to be prepared. And they're telling everybody, you've got to be able to maintain yourself and your family for 72 hours before you can expect any assistance from the government or first responders. And the other thing they have at the Disaster Recovery Park, we were there getting the VIP tour, but it's a Sunday, and there were kids in there who were coming through with their parents because they have an experiential section where you actually get a tablet and you go through and you take a quiz as you go through about what you're supposed to do in terms of the quake. So the level of education is extraordinary, that what they've done with their people, again, an area where we're lacking. So there's a heck of a lot of work to be done. You're all here to learn how we can better achieve these goals, and I just wanted to let you know that if you get a chance to go to Japan, you'll see what we should be doing, and they're constantly working to improve it. So thanks very much. Appreciate it.
We turn next to Congressman Adam Schiff of California. He was elected to Congress in 2000, following service in the California State Senate and as a federal prosecutor. I know from personal experience that Congressman Schiff is a great friend of science and technology in general. It's been a pleasure to work with him on those issues, and he has been a leader in the House of Representatives in securing federal funding for the West Coast Earthquake Early Warning System in 2012, and has been successful in securing funding in subsequent years. So, Congressman Schiff.
John, thank you very much, and thanks for taking us out of order today. I want to not only thank Director Holden, but also Secretary Jewell for hosting this important forum. I'm really pleased that the White House is putting on an event at this critical time, and it's great to be joined by my colleagues and partners from the House, Congressman Peter DeFazio, Derek Kilmer, and of course Senator Merkley. I want you to know at the outset, I was the original early earthquake warning system. I gave accurate and precise information about when an earthquake was going to hit, and it was proved to be fully accurate. I did this well before any other country employed this kind of system, and I'll tell you just a little bit about it. In the 1990s, I was on the telephone with my little brother. He was on the other side of Los Angeles when an earthquake hit, and I said, "Whoa, did you feel that?" And he said, "What?" And then he said, "Whoa." And I gave my brother advance notice of an earthquake. It was precise, it was accurate. It was the rudimentary, the beta version of what we're talking about here. So I just want you to let you know I was ahead of my time. I learned more about the technology, of course, from Caltech researchers back in 2012. And from the beginning, it was very apparent this was a technology that had the capacity to save lives and pay for itself many times over in the event of a significant earthquake. The technology, as we've heard, has been implemented in many other countries with great success. It's proven, and it really, to me, is mind-boggling that it has taken us so long in this country where we are as prone as we are to earthquakes, and those of us on the West Coast know that only too well. The question is not when we'll have another, or not if, we'll have another major quake on the West Coast, only when. We obviously can't stop them, but we can prepare. And just having a few seconds of notice can mean getting to a safe place in your home, crawling under the tables, as we saw in that very powerful video, or stopping trains, stopping surgeries, stopping sensitive manufacturing processes. These are just a few of the benefits that can accrue from an early warning system. Support in the Congress has really grown and blossomed in the last couple of years. We first appropriated $5 million in funding specifically for the system in 2014. Then last year, Congress included $8.2 million for the system in our budget. These positive trends in congressional support, along with strong support from the executive branch, show, I think, the growing awareness and bipartisan character of this effort. Ken Calvert has been a wonderful ally in the Appropriations Committee. I'm very grateful for his help, both in the original appropriations as well as some of the augmentations that we have sought. And the fact that the White House included funding in its budget last year is huge in terms of growing the base of support for this effort. But while this federal investment is hugely important, we also need to look at state and private sources of funding to build out the system of sensors and really operate the system. So I want to take this opportunity to thank the Moore Foundation for their support, which is crucial to the system's success. And once again, urge our western states to follow up with their support, rhetorically, with financial support. It's wonderful the private sector is getting involved, and obviously will benefit a great deal, whether it's internet-based manufacturers or utilities, but the state as well, and many local agencies, utilities, and others will tremendously benefit from this technology, and we urge the states to partner with us, both financially and other ways, so that we can develop this technology sooner rather than later. This investment, I think, again, is really a no-brainer. We fully recognize the budget constraints both federally and state and local government, but the cost of the system pales in comparison to the fact that we can save lives with this system, and we can save property damage many times over the amount that we invest in the system. A fully built-out system that is ready for public use is something that we can achieve if we really devote ourselves to it in just a few years. And I want to thank once again the White House, the many organizations, as well as those in academia who have really moved this effort to the forefront and will be responsible for its implementation. So thanks again for inviting us and for taking us out of order today.
And we'll hear now from Congressman Derek Kilmer of Washington State. He was first elected in 2012, currently serves on the Appropriations Committee and two subcommittees that are particularly important to many of us in the room in the science, technology, and environment space, the Interior Subcommittee and Subcommittee on Commerce, Justice, and Science. He is a leader in the early earthquake warning system discussion, been very vocal in support of it, and has worked directly with tribes on the Olympic Peninsula to develop options so that they can successfully evacuate or shelter in case of a tsunami. Congressman Kilmer.
Well, thanks everybody. I'm going to keep my remarks short because Adam Schiff is my ride. I want to thank Director Holden and Secretary Jewell and frankly all of you for participating in something that I think is really important. It was 10:54 a.m. February 28th, 2001. I was on the 31st floor of the City Center building in Seattle swaying back and forth. And I did drop, cover, and hold on. I would add one additional rule to that. I yelled, "Please, God, don't let me die at work." Which I think should be. I really could have used a really friendly preschool teacher to sing that nice song to me. Listen, I appreciate that the administration is focusing on this issue of earthquake preparedness and resiliency because it really matters. Last summer, the story in the New Yorker, I think, opened a lot of eyes. It was not bedtime reading. But as you heard Secretary Jewell point out, I represent an area that would be underwater if the really big one hit, and we'd see a tremendous loss of life and extraordinary devastation. And that's something that scientists at the UW and John and the crew at the UW and folks in Washington State, including our governor, have been warning us about for years. The threat of an earthquake and the threat of massive tsunami following that looms very large in our lives. And we've got a lot of work to do, but I'm here to tell you we're actually making some progress. Progress, for example, like building the first vertical evacuation safe haven in North America in the Acosta School District, which was a feat that was achieved through local leaders and the federal government working together. And it means that 700 students and staff of the Acosta Elementary School will be able to find safe, go to higher ground and be safe if a big one hits. The effort we're talking about today around the early warning system, I got a chance to visit the UW lab, and the fact that someone could now have, there's an app for that, right? There's the capacity to actually get that on your phone. Just imagine what that means to a longshoreman at the Port of Tacoma moving heavy containers, or a surgeon in a hospital in Tacoma, or a family at the beach, or someone preparing to cross the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. A warning, just having some time can save lives. And listen, this matters. This matters to the 4 Native American tribes that live on the coast of my district that have been there from time immemorial, who deal with who are really on the front lines of these threats. It matters to communities on Washington's coast like Ocean Shores and Westport, where even a handful of seconds of warning can mean the difference between life and death. And frankly, these communities can't do this on their own. They're going to need the federal government to be an adequate partner. So I'm glad that the Congress is stepping up, as Congressman Schiff mentioned, and I'm glad the administration is giving this the attention that it needs. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Well, that was fun, right? Listen, don't take that for granted. That kind of support and commitment from folks that are busy every day doesn't happen by accident. It's a good thing. It's a good problem to have for you guys. In continuing, I'll try not to mess up the order, but John Vidale will talk to us next, and don't ask what happened to his arm, because it was not an earthquake. But it's something like that, actually. But he's a professor at the University of Washington. He's director of the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network and Washington State seismologist. Received his undergraduate degree at Yale University, his PhD from Caltech in 1987. He worked for UC Santa Cruz in the U.S. Geological Survey, taught at UCLA for a decade, and moved to University of Washington in 2006. Research focuses on earthquakes, volcanoes, earth structure, and hazards of strong shaking. Professor Vidale is currently working on monitoring earthquakes and volcanoes in Oregon and Washington, strange slow earthquakes, and exploring how to implement earthquake early warning for the Pacific Northwest. So please join me in welcoming John.
I'm just going to read it from here. Okay, well, so good afternoon. As a scientist, it's most exciting and gratifying to help bring earthquake early warning to fruition for my country. If I'm a little stiff up here, it's from flying over the handlebars of my bike on Friday, cracking a rib and separating my shoulder. Okay, so just now, Richard Allen has shown the need for earthquake early warning. John McPartland has shown its power for BART, and I'll show the path we plan to follow forward. The Shake Alert Early Warning System is a powerful tool built on open collaboration, pulling in diverse and well-tested methods that are setting up the United States well to protect public safety during future earthquakes. Our open collaboration means our methods are transparent. This is necessary because providing serious help in devastating earthquakes may only be needed once every few years and has to work the first time. Open also means that the early warning system is flexible and can be adapted to new earthquake vulnerable regions across the U.S. In fact, although designed on the West Coast, elements of Shake Alert have already been published, discussed, and tested many places across the globe. For example, ELRMS, an essential cog of Shake Alert designed at Berkeley, has been tested on 4 continents, facing a variety of challenging conditions. Another piece called Virtual Seismologists, designed at Caltech, has been developed here and in Switzerland and is improving through extensive testing. The toolbox of methods that we use will allow us to track earthquakes as they grow. The most rapid evaluation watches the small, fastest traveling waves from the beginning of the earthquake, which works to warn communities of earthquakes with magnitudes up to 7. More tracking tools can follow the growth of bigger earthquakes. Those quakes of magnitude 8 and up to magnitude 9, monsters with faulting lasting minutes and stretching up to hundreds of miles, cause an evolving and expanding network of hotspots that violently shake. Tools with multiple methods offer a fast and accurate view of the gamut of earthquakes, giving both people and systems crucial time to take the right protective actions before the strong shaking reaches them. Several earthquake early warning situations arise from the diverse geology across the western United States. For the faults that run through our cities, it's imperative that we have a system which can instantly recognize and notify communities about earthquakes. Sometimes only a few seconds of warning are physically possible. The greater distance from our communities to 30-mile deep earthquakes common under the Washington and Oregon major cities allow 10 to 20 seconds of warning. The long faults, such as the San Andreas in California and the Cascadia Fault in the Pacific Northwest, can allow up to minutes of warning. The state-of-the-art system is coming closer to the public testing phase, but fully turning on the system requires complete funding to deploy the full network of sensors, provide speedy and reliable data transmission, and support the personnel needed to get it done. The implementation plan for earthquake early warning for the West Coast costs $16 million per year for building and operations. The funding level is now $8 million per year, thanks to strong public and private support from 4 universities, Berkeley, Caltech, the University of Oregon, and the University of Washington, coordination from the USGS, and outstanding commitments from the Moore Foundation. We are halfway there. Continued research will ensure that our nation's early warning systems remain at technology's leading edge. Our implementation plan is on track to grow to meet the established goals, but we cannot sleep at the wheel. As science, engineering, and society march forward, so do the possibilities for improved earthquake warnings that support public safety and community response plans. Bob Kirshner will describe 3 projects the Moore Foundation is committed to funding that exemplify this forward-looking science. I'll just mention the project in the Pacific Northwest. The performance of the earthquake early warning system would be bolstered by adding seafloor sensors directly atop the magnitude 9 ground rupture. This information would increase the warning time and make warnings more accurate. The offshore instruments would also watch for long-term signs of tectonic unrest and accelerate scientific understanding of the risk. Forewarning of the shaking is the driver for earthquake early warning, as shaking dominates the $5 billion per year FEMA estimates to be the long-term earthquake losses, but losses from tsunamis have also been horrific in the past decade. Earthquake early warning, particularly in concert with near-shore seafloor sensors, can make important contributions to speed tsunami warnings by seconds to minutes and refine accuracy. In summary, we have a plan for earthquake early warning. The plan is open, widely tested, evolving, and sophisticated. Like the bicycling helmet that saved my head in my accident on Friday, it's critical when most needed. Earthquake early warning is well on its way to help protect lives and property along the West Coast, and we urge that it be brought quickly and fully into use.
Thank you, John, and we really appreciate the example of true life resilience. And Friday in the hospital, and then, here you are less than a week later speaking about that, which you are truly passionate about and making a huge difference. So finally, we'll have Bob Kushner talk to us a little bit about his side of the house, and I think it is so critical to understand the importance of the philanthropic space, non-governmental organizations, whether they be academic, nonprofit, faith-based, or otherwise, and lending a hand to this, because that truly does represent the whole of community. And you heard some of the previous members of Congress talk about private sector companies, not just because of their altruistic nature, but simply because they live and work in these areas and are also subjected to the risk and can add value in the alert and warning phase of these things. But back to Bob. He spearheads the Gordon and Patty Moore Foundation Science Program. Widely respected as an astrophysicist, he won the 2015 Wolf Prize in Physics. He's known not only for his own path-breaking scientific achievements in supernova cosmology, but also for enabling others to achieve scientific breakthroughs. Bob joined the foundation from Harvard University, where he served as the Close Professor of Science. He's the author of Extravagant Universe, Exploding Stars, Dark Energy, and the Accelerating Cosmos. He's a member of the National Academy of Sciences and the American Philosophical Society, and he served as president of the American Astronomical Society from 2003 to 2005. Please join me in welcoming Bob.
I have to say, I was very impressed by the members of Congress. They're very good talkers. They must be selected in some way that has to do with making contact with an audience. I'm Robert Kirshner. I'm the Chief Program Officer for Science at the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation. And the Moore Foundation has supported the United States Geological Survey, UC Berkeley, Caltech, and the University of Washington to work together to understand earthquakes and to develop this earthquake early warning system you've been hearing about. So our private foundation has invested in public and private institutions, and this has had the wonderful effect of bringing a reliable, prompt, and effective earthquake early warning system within our grasp. I'm an astronomer and a teacher, and so I'm going to tell you something about how earthquakes result from the universe in which we live. So human and terrestrial events, of course, are small in the cosmic perspective. A lot has happened since the Big Bang 13.7 billion years ago. The Super Bowl, for example, is not among the top 10 events of cosmic history. But there's a kind of recycling that takes place in the cosmos where stars generate their energy from nuclear fusion, and the ashes of that fusion become the material for the next generation of stars. The Earth formed from the ashes of previous generations of stars, and it's been kept warm since its formation by radioactive elements that were made in the supernova explosions that took place more than 5 billion years ago. Seismologists know that the Earth is still hot and that the core of the Earth is still molten from that early event and that ongoing heating. And that's what makes the Earth such a restless planet. Continents sliding around on a slippery foundation, and that has a great deal to do with why the Earth rips as earthquakes. Since we live on the surface of the Earth, I think it's not wrong for us to have some special interest in all of this. When rocks rip along faults in the crust, earthquakes result. And so they're a natural and inevitable part of an active planet, and they're a very serious risk for human beings. So understanding the big cosmic picture and the details of how earthquakes work is a good thing. And the Moore Foundation seeks to support path-breaking scientific research. And we're proud to support the outstanding seismologists you've heard from today. The waves an earthquake generates can be detected and used to provide a precious seconds of warning so you can take actions that reduce injuries and protect property. So it's not just the high-minded pursuit of science, there's also this public service. And I am a homeowner living within sight of the San Andreas Fault. And I can tell you, it's not just in the abstract that I'm pleased that we're making progress toward an effective and reliable earthquake warning system. So I'm here today to tell you that the Moore Foundation is making a further commitment of $3.6 million to earthquake early warning. That's good. This brings our contribution to more than $10 million since 2011, and it will bring the system closer to implementation. I think if I push this button, something will happen. What button is it? Oh, there we go. Excellent. So let me just tell you a little about that. UC Berkeley is going to move forward with a novel plan to explore how the same sensors that are in your cell phone, the ones that count your steps, can be employed as earthquake sensors, expanding the capacity of the network, and it has the potential to include remote parts of the Earth where cell phones are common, but seismometers are not. Caltech is going to develop a human-like, we're going to be a human-like person at Caltech, a human-like decision-making process to gather information from seismic networks and to help issue prompt and reliable alerts. This has to be done by a machine that never sleeps. It has to be done fast because the warning time is measured in seconds, and it has to be done right so the BART trains do not stop without a good reason. Well, sometimes they do stop without a good reason, but I've been on them. But anyway, not from the false alarms. And the University of Washington, as you heard, will explore the design of a network of sensors on the ocean floor, where the greatest risk to the Pacific Northwest lies. Adding to our private investment funding, I am delighted to announce that Puget Sound Energy has approved a $100,000 grant to the University of Washington Pacific Northwest Seismic Network to purchase strong motion seismometers over the next 4 years to significantly improve the earthquake early warning capacity. Pacific Gas and Electric will join the Shake Alert system, working with UC Berkeley to develop automated and human actions in the seconds before an earthquake strikes to protect lives, decrease property damage, and ensure rapid service restoration. Intel Corporation will gather private sector businesses and lead discussions about the role they can play. Oregon's largest private sector employer, Intel has capital investments of more than $25 billion. Intel will make Shake Alert part of its crisis management program, enabling the high-tech community to react quickly to an earthquake warning, saving millions of dollars per hour in potential downtime. Amazon Catalyst has pledged a research grant to the University of Washington to integrate GPS, Global Positioning System capabilities, into the network to more accurately measure the size of large earthquakes. On the side of public investments, the U.S. Geological Survey received $8.2 million, as we've heard, in the recent omnibus bill for the Shake Alert earthquake early warning system. And this was an important step toward activating this system for public benefit. And from the beginning, the USGS has been the spearhead, working with state, university, and private sector partners to establish the network, lead the decision tree, and run alert tests. Just yesterday, the USGS proposed rules to reduce delivery delays and ensure consistent delivery across multiple technology platforms. I've got one platform here, I've got another platform there. I want them to both work. They're also working with the U.S. Forest Service to expedite placing seismic monitors on Forest Service land, and with the FCC to get new rules that will enhance the delivery of emergency alerts. Today, President Obama signed an executive order establishing a federal earthquake risk management standard to improve the ability of federal buildings to function after an earthquake, reduce risk to people, reduce post-quake recovery costs, and make it possible for communities to recover swiftly. Finally, I want to tell you about several significant state and local commitments that will support areas that will benefit most from earthquake early warning. Governor Kate Brown of the state of Oregon recently hired a state resilience officer and acquired 15 seismometers for nearly $700,000. Maybe she'll have one installed in her front yard, as you can do if you're Secretary of the Interior. The governor advocates collaborating with federal partners, universities, and other stakeholders to develop a public education program on the best ways to respond to earthquake alerts. The city of Eugene, Oregon, will host public forums to educate the community, and the Eugene Water and Electric Board, along with the University of Oregon, will place 4 earthquake early warning sensors to improve the Pacific Seismic Northwest network. Governor Jay Inslee of the state of Washington will make earthquake and tsunami preparedness and resilience a priority. Washington state has experienced 15 major destructive earthquakes in the last 150 years. The state will invest $4.6 million to map, identify, and better anticipate geologic hazards, and will support a tsunami safe haven project that will open in June. So that's a good list. Cosmic time is long. Human life is short. And it's that mismatch between the geological timescale and the human timescale that's one reason we have such a hard time understanding the risk that big earthquakes pose. Even in earthquake country, there may be a strong shock once in a decade or once in a century. But we know they will happen. We know how to provide warning, and out of concern for ourselves and our fellow citizens, we really must do this. In 1775, Paul Revere's horse trotted faster than the redcoats plodded on their way to Concord and Lexington. He provided early warning. The redcoats are coming. That made a difference in the history of the United States. Shake Alert's early warning is broadcast at the speed of light. That's 100,000 times faster than the speed of shaking waves going through a rock. It can make a difference to America, too. Duck, cover, and hold on.
I'm not sure we need any more panels. Just kidding. Just kidding. I want to thank our panelists. Please join me, and you guys were awesome. I think we're gonna take a 15-minute break. As we do, I'm sort of reflecting on and really enjoyed the comments, and John, thinking about your work, and certainly Alice and Tammy's work to get us to this point. You know, the president has said as early as 2009 that for the country to be prepared, we have to do 5 things well. We have to prevent, we have to protect, we have to mitigate, we have to respond, and we have to be able to recover. And lots of people participate in that activity. It's not just a federal activity. It's a state and local. It's an academic. It's community-based organizations. It's businesses. It's the faith-based community. And I think what you're seeing here today, and what you'll hear more of this afternoon, is sort of that intersection of public health, public safety, academics coming together, tackling what are just inherently difficult challenges to make this all a little bit better for all of our preparedness. So I just want to thank you all. We'll take a 15-minute break, and then we'll resume. Thank you. You don't come across as quite so brilliant on the